So Russia is trying to alert the world that the U.S. has funded biolabs in Ukraine and that those labs were conducting AIDS research on Ukrainian military personnel. That is perhaps the craziest sentence I'm going to utter this week. Let me say that again. Ukraine was using biolabs, and they were using those biolabs conducting AIDS research on Ukrainian soldiers. Yes, taking Ukrainian soldiers and testing AIDS research on them. Of course, you'll recall the U.S. denied that there were any biolabs in Ukraine. The Department of Defense even called it Russian propaganda at the time and laughed in a reporter's face for even asking this question, you smug son of a bitch. This is exactly what John Kirby did when a reporter had the gall to ask about these biolabs that are listed on the State Department's website. But it's all Russian propaganda, he said. Watch.
And on this issue of military biological labs in Ukraine that the Russians keep raising, can you basically explain to us what type of relationship, if any, there was between the Pentagon and the Ukrainian side on any biological labs? When was the last cooperation? And what do you have to say about these Russian accusations?
The Russian accusations are absurd. They're laughable. And, in the words of my Irish Catholic grandfather, a bunch of malarkey. There's nothing to it. It's classic Russian propaganda. And I wouldn't, if I were you, I wouldn't give it a drop of ink worth paying attention to.
Yeah, but can you explain to us has there been any relationship between the?
We are not developing biological or chemical weapons inside Ukraine. It's not happening. Yeah.
Thanks, John.
Go ahead.
Don't even print any stories about it. Don't even print any stories about it. Don't waste any ink on it at all. It's just total malarkey. Well, we know that was a lie. And we now know, of course, the biolabs, thanks to Victoria Nuland, came out in congressional testimony from the State Department, admitted this to Congress. She had to because it was on the State Department's website. It was on the State Department and embassy websites that there's biolabs. We knew that it was out there. We knew that you can't hide this stuff. But they tried to. But Victoria Nuland came out and admitted it. Watch.
I only have a minute left. Let me ask you, does Ukraine have chemical or biological weapons?
Ukraine has biological research facilities, which, in fact, we are now quite concerned Russian forces may be seeking to gain control of. So we are working with the Ukrainians on how they can prevent any of those research materials from falling into the hands of Russian forces should they approach.
I'm sure you're aware that the Russian propaganda groups are already putting out there all kinds of information about how they've uncovered a plot by the Ukrainians to release biological weapons in the country and with NATO's coordination. If there's a biological or chemical weapon incident or attack inside of Ukraine, is there any doubt in your mind that 100% it would be the Russians that would be behind it?
There is no doubt in my mind, Senator, and it is classic Russian technique to blame on the other guy what they're planning to do themselves.
Last question. I am certain that the Russians...
Sorry, my Steam Deck's not working. Anyway, just let me feed you the question.
Here's this softball. Yeah.
Right.
Toss it. I'm going to toss it in real slow for you here. Here it comes. Here's a softball. Ready? There you go. Hit it.
And she laughs. She's even laughing. She's like, "Thank you, Senator, for that very easy question." It wouldn't even cross my mind. Of course, it would be Russian propaganda. People with a low IQ, that's how they speak. People who don't understand what's going on, they'll just blame anything on Russian propaganda. That's all they do. It's the easiest way out because then it shuts down conversation. Intelligent people don't talk like that. So her worry when the war started was that Russian troops would gain control of these labs and gain access to resources, she said. Meaning she was prepping us for Russia to see these things and that when they say it, we should preemptively know that this would be disinformation. Well, Russia has gained access now, And these areas are in Russian control. And wouldn't you know it, we're learning some things. And they can deconstruct these labs on their own. And they say that they have. The labs were in Luhansk through a company called Farm Biotest. Now, I want to say that Mike Jones, our friend Mike Jones from Iowa Gray, has seen these labs and spoken to Ukrainians who confirmed to him that people in this region were being experimented on. Confirmed this. We have seen this footage. We have seen the footage, but we will leave it to him to show it when he's good and ready. And we encourage you to follow what he does in his great reporting. So, Russian Lieutenant General Igor Kirillov presented Ukrainian language documents referring to HIV infection studies that began in 2019. The list of targeted groups shows service members alongside prisoners, drug addicts, and other patients at high risk of infection. Now, these documents show that what Nuland said, that the U.S. was trying to relocate personnel and move biological materials out of Ukraine into Poland, the Baltic states, and Central Asia as the Russian troops advanced in Ukraine during the special operation. They also show, these documents show, that the United States was working on coronavirus since 2015. And they published this document. Notice this refers to if any experiments proposed for AIM-1 result in a virus with phenotype of enhanced pathology and transmissibility growth of more than 10, blah, 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 blah. Notice this refers to the NIH funding, the last sentence there. No NIH funding can be used to perform such experiments until these experiments had been approved by the NIAID. So notice this refers to NIH funding, which Dr. Fauci says he knew nothing about because it wasn't happening on his continent, right? It's happening over there. Plausible deniability. According to Krylyov, the Russian military has recovered more than 20,000 documents and other materials related to the biological programs in Ukraine. While interviewing eyewitnesses and participants, Russia asked the United Nations to investigate this, but the UN is just not that into that idea, of course. So they said, no, thank you. Now, remember in October when they asked, Russia went to the United Nations and said, hey, all these biolabs that they had first denied existed, then they acknowledged they existed. We want to know what they were actually doing there. Were they doing military biological activities? We want to know. And by the way, China asked as well. We want to know what the U.S. is doing with these biolabs in Ukraine. Because there's been some disturbing reports coming out. And the UN said, nah, we're not going to vote to allow that to happen. We're not going to investigate.
It's also funny because how often do we talk about how corrupt the Ukrainian government is? It's like one of the most corrupt governments in Europe, right?
Yep.
So we've pointed that out. So think about that. They have this information. Mm-hmm. So could it be, and this is just spitballing, that Zelensky had that information and is using that and saying, hey, I'll release this if you don't give us billions of dollars, if you don't give us weapons, you know, because like
blackmail.
Blackmail. Because Biden was involved in some of the labs too, Hunter, and you know there was some money changing hands there. So
we're going to get to that. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I mean, possibly we've seen documents though, and we'll get to that in a minute, that show Zelensky was asking for documents to be destroyed that related to Hunter Biden. So how complicit were, you know, and maybe this was early on, so we knew we're going to get tons of money from the United States. I've got to destroy these Hunter Biden relationship documents and all of that. So I'll go along. But look, here's the thing. You're right. If you're in this situation, you know you've got like backup hard drives, you've got backup thumb drives, you've got backup stuff, you're burning documents or whatever, but you've got the goods somewhere hidden that in case you need it, like blackmail, you could pull it out.
Yeah, they're not going to lose their advantage.
Right. So last October, Russia filed an official complaint over alleged U.S.-backed biological activities in Ukraine and requested a United Nations probe into the matter, but then the UN Security Council said, nah, rejected it. Rejected Moscow's proposal. The U.S., of course, voted against it. The U.K. voted against it, and so did France. Because we're all about transparency, right? So why would they do this? If they were really interested in preventing future pandemics, isn't an investigation in everyone's interest? But of course, they would want to cover this up. And this, of course, goes all the way